Let's get started here. Let's get started. I'd like to welcome to the stage for our panel, Fireside Chat, all about mobile gaming's multi-platform future. And I've got two expert speakers joining me on stage, Willem Demmers from Trail and Johan Eile from Kabam. So, guys, do you want to come to the stage? Let's welcome these guys to the stage. Thank you. Come on and sit down. Take your seat. And there's three mics, so I'll sit down with you. I'm going to be your host for this panel and get these guys talking. Complete with literal fire for our fireside chat. So I hope everyone's enjoying the festive ambience. Your mic working there? So
nope.
Oh, hi guys. Can we fire up all three mics? I think.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, seems to be working.
Oh, this is great.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Okay, brilliant. So let's get started. The purpose of this fireside chat is to talk about how the mobile gaming ecosystem has changed significantly, some of the challenges that the mobile gaming scene is facing at the moment, and how taking a multi-platform approach to that can solve some of those problems. And we'll look at the opportunities there. But before we get into some of the specific questions, including the market overview and some of the advantages of taking a kind of a broader platform approach, I'd like my expert speakers to introduce themselves. So I'll tell you what. Let's start with Johan here, and can you just give us a bit of intro to yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it to the point. Making games for a long time, in places at THQ, original THQ, Ubisoft, and so on. In 2014, we started a new company in Montreal, and been publishing on, I think, 16 different platforms since the foundation of the company. And one of the first things we pushed was actually putting our mobile game on Facebook at the time. So that's just to sort of establish why we're sitting here and talking, and we can kind of continued the cross-platform approach. So today I'll go back. In 2019, we sold the company to Kabam. Today I'm the GM of Kabam Montreal, and we continue to build games.
That's fantastic. And you work with some really big IPs as well, don't you? Some of the games will definitely be games that people here have recognized the franchises. Fantastic. Willem, do you want to give us some intros to your...
Sure.
Tip?
Yeah, so my name is Willem Demmers, and back in 2007, I was part of the team that built Let's Mix, which was one of the very first music streaming services, which then became Beats Music, which then became Apple Music. Mm-hmm. And for the past 10 years, I've been wanting to make it equally simple to play video games. And back in 2016, I founded my current company, which is Trail, with a purpose to make gaming easier than watching YouTube.
Perfect, thank you. And we're definitely going to come back to that. So in this chat, we're going to talk about why thinking of a multi-platform approach is important, and what's changed in the mobile space, and what the publishing should be thinking about now. But why do we need to do this? So let's start. Johan, can you talk us a little bit about the market overall, why we're at this pivot point here, and what challenges are developers and publishers facing that has inspired this conversation?
I think, well, obviously during COVID, we kind of all got slammed with the deprecation of IDFA and ATT. It's been hashed on and so on. When that happened, there's a bit of freak out. On the other hand, we had, as part of the development strategy, been working on cross-platform games. So it's just been part of like the native backbone of the thinking. So when all those trends are happening, and I don't want to sort of beat a dead horse, but it's extremely challenging to do the type of arbitration marketing that we used to do on mobile. It's just quite simple, and that's forced us, I think, to kind of go back to the origins, where you have to have a good game, you have to market the good game, do like proper marketing, like hard work. Like I know some of us used to go to, all these conferences, pitch, press, pitch, publishers. We're back in that kind of raw grind to a large degree, and that's I don't know if it's a cycle or if it was always like that, but it's become very, very apparent that you kind of have to do things almost like old school again, and that's kind of forced us into thinking about kind of the same division as like you're making a game for the Xbox or PS. It's like a hard wall between them. It's not like super compatible, right? So same thing in this case, and like looking at the trend right now, it's forced us as game developers to just like fully open up and be like, okay, we can't just focus on iOS and Android or Apple and Google. Like it has to be like much broader.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll definitely come back to that. I mean, I get a sense that there's a lot of things that have changed for publishers. The IDFA is the big thing. That mobile game developers, it was all about performance marketing and the data, and that's kind of gone away with the ATT. But there were other things too, not just COVID enforced changes in player behavior, but just the rising cost of UA, all these kind of things that went along with it. It was kind of time for the market to consider other things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be extremely good at making games, obviously, but you also have to be super sharp on like your paid user acquisition. There's tons of opportunities to screw up, and if you literally like lose a step, your competition is like running over. And like anything from marketing tech and like creative marketing tech and like stuff that we as developers and publishers maybe don't thought about the same way as we do today. That just literally sideswiped a huge part of the industry, and we see it with some of the games that are extremely successful. And you're like how? Like what is that they're doing? That like what are we missing? Right. So I think that's the kind of stuff that we've seen.
Yeah, great. And I'm going to come to Willem next, because I think what this highlights is that there was a point where maybe a developer was making a game and it could be published and it could just go onto the Apple App Store and that would be enough. That would be how to build a business, and that kind of isn't right now. That isn't the right way to think now, is it? So do you want to like talk us a little bit more about the advantages of multi-platform publishing? Where do we go from here?
So I think one of the key issues with app stores is its discoverability, right? Which is why you need to do the performance marketing in the first place, because the app stores aren't really solving that for you anymore. There's just it's a large audience, but you have a lot of competitors, so it's become a red ocean. For the past 10 years, business has been very good, but it's starting to become sort of full.
Yeah.
But there are many opportunities outside of the app stores. So you have you can do third-party app stores, or you could look at towards desktop and web, which is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And you still have like 2.2 billion people who are using the desktop browser daily, essentially. And they don't really play a lot of games there because there is no app store for desktop in the same way. So there you don't really have the same competition, and you can still do performance marketing with retargeting. You don't have the same ATT issues there. So it's about finding like new unexplored channels, or channels that were sort of forgotten about.
Yeah.
And finding new sort of blue ocean strategies. So mobile was the blue ocean, and that was a great strategy. And I think I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't be doing mobile. You obviously should. But you should also be looking a bit, expanding your view outside of that, I think, if you want to be successful today, tomorrow, and in the years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Just thinking about where else to play. It reminds me a little bit, like we were saying, of the previously, some years ago, publishing games on Congregate or Facebook gaming. And as you say, we sort of almost forgot about that somehow, and that again. Actually, there are other advantages too here. Johan, I think when we were speaking before here, you mentioned that publishing to the web, for instance, allows you to iterate faster and test faster in a way that maybe mobile builds wasn't. Are there other advantages to developers that maybe we should be talking
about? I mean, in many ways, it feels like we've skipped a generation of developers. Like when we, making games on all different platforms for a long time, and when we started making for mobile, specifically free-to-play, we were testing the games on Facebook and on Canvas. So like we launched, and we didn't want to burn the game on the App Store, so we tested it on Facebook at the time. So we probably released the game 6 or 7 months earlier on Facebook. And we were very quickly, several times a day, able to do push updates and have users. So it was just an incredible development tool. Like we never expected like a ton of revenue from it, but it became like a crucial part of the iteration in the development cycle. And that was kind of lost at a certain point. We actually continued to publish on Canvas and continued to work with Congregate and stuff like that, because it was just part of the DNA of the company. But I think that was sort of lost at some point here. And that's one of the things that Willem and I have been chatting about. It's like there's an opportunity to bring it back into a dev environment and actually have it as a tool. And once you're there, and especially if you look at some of these hyper casual games, like you could do this so much faster and get validation so much cheaper on the web. And that was like one of the key components when we sort of started looking at like what do we do or how do we react with the sort of inability to be effective on paid UA. It's like, why don't we start using all the tools that we had created to push content on the web?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that's, you mentioned some advantages there of publishing on the web. Willem, with players' behavior is different on mobile and on console and on Steam and on online. Do you see a difference in engagement with publishing on the web? I mean, is that another advantage that people should be aware of?
Yeah, so what we see with our customer games is that, so we compare sometimes the stats with like Play Store or such. And what we've seen is that the engagement is much higher on web. So speaking about web here is like on desktop. We have theories about why this is, but what we believe it is because it's a larger screen. Yeah. And many of the games, you try to do as much as possible with a small screen. But when you have these players, especially in like casual or mid-core games, you have a very small percent of players that make up most of the revenue. Yeah. And they play like 5 hours a day with their thumbs. Like they're not necessarily just playing on the subway. They're sitting at home at night or in the evening, and they play with their friends. And there we see that the amount of purchases, for example, might be 6 times as many per month on web. Wow. So it seems like the engagement is brought up a lot.
Yeah, I mean it's super. Super clear. Like we saw people playing constantly. They never disconnected. So they'd have it running in the background, right, at work, obviously, so the numbers are through the roof. Like they're not even comparable in terms of that type of player behavior. And we still see that today on PC, for example. These are running like heavily in the background. I mean, one of the reasons on this, I want to actually chat with Ville about. One of the reasons why we went away from web is like we started running into technical limitations of what kind of games we could push in sort of real time, and we're running out of there used to be this kind of like runtime error in the Chrome browser. It just drive me absolutely nuts. Any thoughts about that and how we're hopefully can go away from all that?
Yes, I think it's there's some history there. So back in 2010. The web for playing sort of started dying a bit because Chrome was killing the Unity web player, so you couldn't just build from Unity to web, and Apple was killing Flash. Right. And there was a big fight with Adobe at the time. And eventually, I think Apple actually acquired their CTO. But that's been sort of like, so the browsers started cooperating better after that, and they were building more and more tools that you could make use of, WebGL being one of those. And it's been slowly ramping up, and it's still very difficult to sort of stitch it all together, which is what we're trying to do at Trail. But it's definitely possible to run the games now in the browser performantly, and you can even like if you build a lot of tools around it, or if you use Trail, you can actually have it in your pipeline the same way that you would have with building for iOS or Android. So it's more like another app store, and it's performant and all of that. But it is difficult if you're going at it alone. There is a lot of technical hurdles that you need to get over. You need to know both like native programming, you need to know web programming, you need to build sort of your own app store around it and handle purchases and all that. So that's the niche that we sort of found ourselves trying to solve.
Actually, let's talk about the purchases. I mean, that was one of the limitations at the time. Like this is like 2014-ish, when we were like having fun with this a lot. People were not super keen to leave their credit cards on like a web store. Like, I think that's changed like brilliantly now. Like we have no problem anymore. So that like payment barrier that we saw on the web, like we have high engagement and great stuff, like but relatively low LTVs. That's changed, right? Because people are now like they have no issue leaving their card on the platform, So I think that's a game changer for web as well. Like just like the transaction of that. Like there's multiple providers obviously, but finding somewhere like we basically removed that barrier that was there for us to be like super successful on these platforms. That's interesting. So you've tackled two challenges there, if you like, for publishers and developers in the room. They're kind of, can you monetize? Can people pay? And they seem willing to do that. And then also the kind of development challenge, like if you're an indie studio, and those seem to be, so right now, it basically is the conclusion of this chat, if you like, that there's no reason why a developer in this room wouldn't publish to the web as well as Google or to the App Store. Or is there anything else that we should be aware of? Are there any pitfalls that we haven't, that people should be aware of? There's lots of pitfalls. Like don't make games. No. Pitfalls. I mean, I guess the way we talk about it and like the culture that we're building in the studio is not cross-platform. It's like platform agnostic. So how we deal with all these different issues there could be multiple solutions that we end up using, and they're all fairly available and relatively easy to use. And you know, some of the discussions we had with Willem is like it's actually like built like a really incredible platform, really easy to work with. That becomes a game changer, especially when we like are used to publishing native from Unity. So I think if there's anything, it's more to actually think about it, design for it from the start. You might not need to do it or want to do it in the end, but if you're mindful about it, it becomes a very sort of pedestrian thing after. We're coming sort of to the end of time there. I wanted just to see. I've got a couple more questions, but was there any questions for the audience for Trail and Kabam? Yeah, one right down here in the front. Why don't you take my mic to say that? Well, there we go.
Hey, thanks for the great insights. I was curious. So you said, I mean, it's good to keep it in mind and design for it, but do you have insights on what type of games make more sense to do this for? Not every team has the capacity to think about all this, and it's really good to, for example, design certain games for mobile, right, for that experience. But are there games or are there types of genre that you find especially good for this?
I mean, we make mid-core RPGs just by kind of interest, right? So obviously we think they fit really well. We design with landscape, no horizontal, like from the start. Like you can literally dynamically shift, so we can resize it super easily depending on what screen we go on. And that's just like the team is just, it's ingrained in the backbone. If you don't have those reflexes, it's hard. Like that I'll admit, and I just think it's something that you either make part of your kind of framework or your development. Just how you see it and make sure that you keep that door open. The way we look at it is more about let's keep the door open. It's not very expensive to keep it open, and then we can actually see like, do we need to go and close that door and like go after that market. I don't have, like we were talking about this before, like I personally think all games should be thinking about it, and I don't see a specific genre, but I don't know what you're thinking, Bill.
I mean, we've seen hyper-casual work on web even after sort of Unity web player disappeared and Flash, like they still exist, right? And that's the ads monetized, and that's always sort of worked on web when you can get to the numbers. But what we see now, at least on our platform, is that even free-to-play, like casual, in-app purchase-driven games are highly lucrative on web, and they can function very well. But it depends, of course, if you built the game to work exclusively around swiping and things like that, it might not be a good fit for the peripherals on desktop. But for most games, what we've seen is that, especially with our tools, it can take a couple of weeks and you can sort of port an existing game. And you have success stories like Hero Wars, which is a Unity game for mobile, and they have it on web, and they're doing something like 40% of their revenue, like nearly 200 million a year from web. Yeah, so I think it's a lot of games could work. We started seeing specifically the casual to mid-core that's also possible to bring there, but hyper casual has been around on web forever.
John, I think we'll probably have to leave it there.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
What I suggest is if people have questions on this topic, and there's loads more we could talk about, to look up Johan or Willem on Meet to Match or find them around later. There's lots we could dive into here. And I've got a couple of questions as well. So we'll follow up on pocketgamer.biz as well later on. Thank you. And right now on trail.gg, people can come there and play Pixel Starships and
Airport City.
Perfect. So that's the way to go and see that in action. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.